Top 10 Best Movies from the Top Genres. Movies are an art form, and like any work of artwork, they are preferred, critiqued, liked, and hated with the aid of the many those who see them. Someone may watch a film and walk away angry and irritated while every other may weep in joy at what they saw. It's subjective, like maximum works of art, top 10 greatest movies to win Best Picture. That's commonly authentic. However, then there are the movies which are nearly universally loved. Granted, there's continually a person who hated Citizen Kane, however there are tens of millions greater who loved it. This listing breaks down 10 special genres to spotlight the best movie of everyone, supplied in no specific order. Doubtless, many will agree and disagree, so sound off in the remarks together with your favorites. 10. Comedy, Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Comedy is one of the maximum subjective genres available due to the fact what's funny to a few human beings is either idiotic or offensive to others. That being said, some matters are objectively humorous, and the subgenre that appears to get the most chuckles out of an target market is slapstick. Still, slapstick is regularly the bottom shape of comedy. Satire might be its opposite, because it tends to tap into a more intellectual idea of what makes something humorous, and there aren't plenty of movies that do this well. The movie that does it higher than another is Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. The movie is as silly as Monty Python at the same time as being as lethal severe as Patton. Being able to make nuclear battle funny isn't any easy undertaking, however when you take an actor like George C. Scott and inform him to do everything over the pinnacle, throw in a horrific scenario main to nuclear annihilation, and get Peter Sellers to play 3 separate characters, were given comedy gold to your fingers. Sellers' performance alone qualifies Dr. Strangelove as an immortal comedy, and whilst Monty Python really deserves point out, Kubrick's Strangelove is arguably the best comedy ever made. 9. Drama, Citizen Kane, 1941. It changed into noted inside the intro, so you knew Citizen Kane turned into certain to show up somewhere on this list. Citizen Kane turned into a movie that taken aback a variety of people, but no longer for the motives you would possibly think. People were greatly surprised at how noticeably properly the film changed into, as Orson Welles produced, co-wrote, starred, and had final reduce. The guy had never directed a movie before this one got here out, so it wasn't sure that it would be successful. That being stated, he become closely courted by using RKO to do something for the studio, and his contract stipulated that he be allowed to direct pics, his first become arguably his finest cinematic success on some of levels. Citizen Kane tells the tale of Charles Foster Kane, a wealthy industrialist who dies with one word on his lips, Rosebud. The movie maintains with try and decide what his death phrase intended. Interestingly, the movie many critics discover as the high quality ever made was a container office failure. It didn't get better its expenses and became quite obscure. It performed extra achievement in 1956 following a French assessment, which brought about a revival. 8. Science fiction, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, 1982. It doesn't have any of the awesome CGI you'll find in a modern sci-fi film, however that's what makes E.T. something special. Like most films from the early 80s, filmmakers needed to depend upon puppeteering, and it says something approximately how properly E.T. was made that seeing him hurting inside the film's third act can elicit a tear from even the toughest of hearts. The film is one pretty tons all people has visible at least as soon as in their life, and some of the scenes are so iconic, they've controlled to completely permeate the zeitgeist in methods few movies should ever wish to emulate. A tale about a boy and an alien who become friends and a long way extra is a tale that in some way resonates, and it's one each person can experience. The journey of driving your motorbike far away from the bad men is something kids and adults can discover with, but when E.T. levitates them into the sky, the story becomes magical. There are heaps of splendid sci-fi movies, lots of which have the phrase "star" within the name, but the component approximately E.T. that receives it the top spot is that it's loved by means of everybody who watches it. That can't be said of all technological know-how fiction films, as lots of them have area of interest audiences, whereas E.T. does not. 7. Romance, Casablanca, 1942. For those who think Casablanca is overplayed because the pinnacle romance film, it can be time to move again and watch it yet again. The film is an immortal classic. It's one of the most quotable movies ever made, and it came out nearly 80 years ago. Casablanca is ready a love tale that hasn't a hazard in hell of running out, and most effective one of the people in love recognizes that truth. The warfare is tearing up all of Europe and North Africa, however inside the midst of all of it, a cynical American expat runs a bar and pines over the lady he fell in love with during a brief, yet memorable tryst in Paris. The tale is so well developed and nuanced, it's effortlessly a contender for being one of the exceptional movies ever made. Other films had been vying for this role, consisting of An Affair to Remember, Titanic, Brokeback Mountain, and even Ghost battled it out for this spot. Still, in the end, it's usually going to be Casablanca. Making this choice turned into difficult, however if Casablanca didn't make it to the pinnacle, I'd remorse it. Maybe no longer nowadays. Maybe not day after today, but quickly and for the relaxation of my existence. 6. Horror, Psycho, 1960. Like each other genre of movie, horror has a ton of subgenres to pick from. There are slasher flicks, psychological suspense films, or even tremendous occult movies like The Omen or The Exorcist. Ultimately, the great horror has to offer goes to a film that helped outline the genre as one that might instill an experience of fear within the audience at the same time as making it seem as if the villain might be anyone. What Anthony Perkins managed to do with Norman Bates turned into to offer up a practical villain who could sincerely be your next-door neighbor, or the character sitting subsequent to you on a bus. Sure, he was loopy, he dressed up as his dead mom, who sat mummified in his home, however that point aside, he was a charismatic and appealing young guy. He was a piece awkward and regarded utterly innocent. So innocent, you might sense secure taking a shower, even supposing it's the closing issue you do. Psycho become brilliantly written, directed, and acted. Even the digicam work becomes some of the satisfactory scene in a film up to that factor in time, and it's smooth to peer why Psycho is considered one of the best suspense horror films ever made. 5. Action, Seven Samurai, 1954. There's a announcing that imitation is the best shape of flattery. If that's true in filmmaking, Akira Kurosawa's immortal conventional, Seven Samurai is one of the maximum flattered films ever made, as its tale has been adapted into such a lot of films, it's ridiculous. If you've visible Kurosawa's work, you understand him to be one of the greatest administrators of all time. He placed everything he had into his films, and his paintings went directly to inspire the likes of Kubrick, Scorsese, Tarantino, Lucas, Spielberg, and greater. His films had been epic tales full of originality and exquisite settings that ring authentic with the pronouncing that every body is a portray. Seven Samurai is a tale you've probably seen earlier than, even in case you've by no means seen the film. A village is terrorized by way of bandits and hires on 7 to protect them. It's the plot of The Magnificent Seven, The Three Amigos, and A Bug's Life, and it influenced Hollywood filmmakers for many years. There are plenty of first-rate movement films available, and whilst the pinnacle spot ought to have long gone to an extra commercially appealing movie released especially currently, it's tough to bypass this movie with the aid of as one of the greatest testimonies ever placed to film. 4. Adventure, Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981. Often, movement and adventure are thrown together into an unmarried style, however a few movies need to be separated into their own style. Adventure is a genre with a lot of options. War movies should fall within journey, but so may want to a western or maybe technology fiction. Ultimately, a top-notch adventure movie features exactly that, a exquisite adventure, and there's nobody higher at occurring in journey than Indiana Jones. In his first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jones goes on a globe-spanning adventure filled with Nazis and Jewish archaeological records to locate the Ark of the Covenant. Throughout the movie, this faculty professor fights against a plethora of enemies. He swims to a submarine, which happily didn't submerge with him on Pinnacle, and he dug through the clues to locate an artifact of such splendid significance, it changed into coveted with the aid of all people and everyone who knew of its life. The movie started one of the maximum successful journey franchises in history, and whilst maximum of these films are awesome, the very first Indiana Jones film takes the lead because the best journey movie ever made. 3. Fantasy, The Wizard of Oz, 1939. The greatest delusion movie of all time almost went to The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, but looking back at all the amazing fable movies from during movie records, the immortal conventional, The Wizard of Oz takes the pinnacle spot. Like a number of the contenders in sci-fi, a few delusion movies don't appeal to a broad target market. There are human beings out there who don't like hobbits, elves, or whatever associated with Dungeons and Dragons. Other fable films that would have taken a top spot are those offering Muppets like Labyrinth or The Dark Crystal. The Wizard of Oz is one of those movies everyone sits down to observe sooner or later. Most see it after they're youngsters, but all meaning is that when those human beings develop up and have children in their own, the film comes lower back out to entertain a new era whilst the parents watch Dorothy and her pals with nostalgia. The story factors aren't complex, the musical numbers are memorable, and the characters are the type we keep in mind fondly years after watching the film. The Wizard of Oz is an undying classic, and despite being extra than 80 years old, it stays the finest fable film ever made. 2. Musical, Singin' in the Rain, 1952. Musicals are an thrilling genre of film, as they often don't work nicely. What does nicely in a live theater doesn't continually switch onto the silver display, and as an end result, some humans actually love musicals while different oldsters robotically hate them. Despite this, there have been numerous musical movies, which have long passed on to win a ton of awards, as they have lovely songs, notable characters, and on the stop of the day, a terrific film is a good film whether or not human beings are making a song spontaneously or no longer. The choice for the greatest musical landed on Singin' in the Rain, but it just as nearly went to The Sound of Music. Both films are grand epics, which superbly showcase first-rate songs belted out by way of a number of the most gifted humans in the industry. Ultimately, Singin' in the Rain stole the display in reality because it capabilities some amazing performances in a light-hearted tale. The competition functions a darker tale, and it's tough to look at Singin' within the Rain and no longer sense joyous whilst the other movie tends to lead the target market in other directions. 1. Animation, Toy Story, 1995. Animated movies can encompass any genre, but that doesn't mean there's now not a single film capable of taking a top spot as the greatest lively movie of all time. Animation has been a medium for function movies because the release of 1937's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and given that then, there were heaps of first-rate lively titles. There are many to pick from, but the movie this is universally liked with the aid of youngsters and adults alike must be 1995's Toy Story. There are plenty of movies that might take the pinnacle spot right here. Movies like The Last Unicorn, The Iron Giant, The Secret of NIMH, or any of hundreds extra. However, Toy Story did something most lively films failed to do earlier than it flawlessly bridged the distance among adults and kids. By providing all of the toys mother and father performed with once they have been kids, the movie managed to appeal to the kid in each person. Children loved it even as mother and father waxed nostalgic about their lengthy lost Speak and Spell and Slinky. The movie is a masterpiece, and while the sequels are first-rate, the unique stands as the best lively film ever made.